In the Bible, there is a futuristic, mysterious nation that is referred to by several different names. Mystery Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and of the abominations of the earth, the great harlot, the great city Babylon, the daughter of Babylon, and even mockingly called the virgin daughter of Babylon. 5 prophets mention this nation: John, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Zechariah, and a nameless psalmist who was held as a captive in Babylon. 4 of the prophets called her the daughter of Babylon, expressly distinguishing this nation from ancient Babylon. Few people today even have a clue about the identity of this woman, yet a careful study of the scriptures convincingly reveals that this mystery nation is none other than the United States of America. I grew up hearing how it seemed incredible that the world's only superpower was not even mentioned once in the Bible. Well, the USA is in the Bible, it's just hidden. This nation did not exist when the Bible was written, so how do you describe a futuristic superpower? Mystery Babylon's identity can be clearly determined if you know what to look for. And that's what we're going to do. And let's start out with the first major clue. The Apostle John declared in the book of Revelation that an angel told him Mystery Babylon is a nation sitting on many waters. Revelation 17:1, "Come, I will show you the judgment of the great harlot, who sits on many waters, with whom the kings of the earth committed fornication." In the Bible, there are 4 prophecies from 3 different prophets about this amazing nation, located in a very distinctive land which has many waters. These people are fierce and powerful as well as rich. However, the main distinguishing point about these people is that their land has many waters. Isaiah described this unique feature twice in 2 different verses, repeating these exact same words both times. A people terrible from their beginning onward, a nation powerful and treading down, whose land the rivers divide. Notice that Isaiah uses the word nation. It's goi in Hebrew. So we are definitely talking about a nation here, not a religious system or a spiritual structure. Mystery Babylon is a nation. That's why Revelation 17:2 says, with whom the kings of the earth committed fornication. Kings are leaders of nations, and nations always deal with other nations and their kings. Many times people try to paint Mystery Babylon as just a religious system or a global control structure. The failure to identify Mystery Babylon as a distinct nation will throw you off course and blind you to discerning the end times. And this nation has a distinct characteristic that it's divided by rivers. Look at how the United States is divided by the major rivers that are evenly distributed across 2/3 of the country. Let's look at the 4th verse about many waters from the prophet Jeremiah. "O you who dwell by many waters, abundant in treasures, your end has come, the measure of your covetousness." This nation of many waters is also rich and covetous, and Jeremiah is prophesying about her end. So this nation of many waters is going to be destroyed. This agrees with our very first verse about the judgment of the great harlot who sits on many waters. In fact, 3 of the 4 verses that talk about this land of many waters also describe this nation's judgment. This is most likely why studying about Mystery Babylon is not very popular, especially if you happen to live inside her borders. And if you're used to being proud and arrogant to start with, how will you ever listen to someone who mentions your judgment? Let's take a look at the geography of America, considering that the main distinguishing factor about Babylon the Great's land is the abundance of water. 3 different prophecies mention this 4 times. Look at this map. Mexico has no commercially navigable rivers, not one. Canada has no commercially navigable rivers, other than the short St. Lawrence River, which flows out from Lake Ontario. Now let's compare America with the other top 4 countries of the world with the largest river systems. You will see just how much the USA stands out above all the other nations, and you will see that only America perfectly fits the biblical description for their land of many waters. China is just about 5% larger than the USA, as you can see on this map, so we can get a good feel about how its rivers compare to the same sized America. China has the most kilometers of navigable waterways of any nation in the world, 128,000 kilometers. However, due to seasonal droughts and floods, only 12% of these rivers are usable for large-scale commercial freight. Therefore, realistically speaking, China lags behind the USA in total length of commercially usable waterways, having only 80% of what America has. The Yangtze River is the 3rd longest river in the world, only about 85 miles shorter than the Amazon. However, China sure doesn't come behind in freight volume with 4,200 million metric tons. That's 4.2 trillion metric tons of freight, 10 times more cargo than the entire United States system, which is 2nd globally. The Yangtze River carries most of China's freight. Look at this line of ships stuck in traffic near Yangluo Port in Wuhan in June of 2024. Half of China's 20,000 chemical factories are on the Yangtze, like this liquid natural gas facility, making it one of the most polluted rivers in the world. Midway down the Yangtze is the Three Gorges Dam, the world's largest hydropower project, constructed in 1993. This makes this portion of the river highly reliable year-round, with its locks and engineered flood control, but this is not the norm for most of China. The Yangtze flooded on July 18, 2020, and 2 years later it experienced its greatest drought in 150 years. So there are still summer floods and winter dry seasons that affect most of China. 65% of the traffic is on the Yangtze, with the remaining 35% distributed between 3 systems. The Yellow River, as you see here, the Pearl River Delta Network that eventually flows into the South China Sea, and the Grand Canal, the longest artificial waterway in the world, stretching 1,100 miles. It's an ancient engineering marvel with complex lock systems managing the water levels, and it connects Beijing in the north with Hangzhou in the south. Russia is 79% larger than the United States, but as you can see, its north to south dimensions are almost equal to America. Russia just has a greater width, so this helps us to easily compare the two countries. Russia technically comes in 2nd place globally with its total kilometers of navigable waterways, just 16% less than China's at 108,000 kilometers. The only commercially practical waterway is Russia's unified deepwater system, which connects the internal rivers of the Baltic Sea, the Gulf of Finland, the White Sea, and the Black Sea via the Sea of Azov. This system covers about 6,500 kilometers, which is about 1/3 of what America has. However, in terms of freight transport, Russia is number 3 globally, behind China and the USA, with 105 million metric tons annually. The main waterway on the unified deepwater system is the Volga River, and even though this river is highly developed, they can't keep it from freezing. As you can see, the Russians managed to make good use of this frozen river. It's also a great opportunity to take up the winter sport of ice fishing. And even the dogs get to enjoy the ice too. Most of Russia's waterways are not developed, therefore they are subject to seasonal floods and droughts as well as freezing. The Volga freezes annually and operates only about 7 months out of the year. Despite its winter beauty, Russia's system doesn't compare to the highly efficient waterways of America. Brazil is about 5% smaller than the United States, so its rivers can be easily compared on the same scale as America. Brazil ranks number 3 globally with 50,000 kilometers of navigable waterways, mostly located in the Amazon River basin. At about 4,000 miles long, the Amazon is the second longest river in the world, just 132 miles shorter than the Nile. The Amazon flows through 4 countries, Brazil, Colombia, Peru, and Venezuela, with Brazil holding by far the largest portion of the river. Brazil lists their economically navigable waterways at 20,400 kilometers, just barely ahead of the United States with 19,300 kilometers. However, only 6,500 kilometers of Brazil's rivers see consistent high-volume use. This places them on par with Russia at number 5 for the actual kilometers of commercially used waterways, and not in the number 1 position as their data deceptively suggests. Look at the map and see that there are not many major cities in the heart of Brazil. They're all on the coast. That's because of swampland impedes traffic. Yes, there are a lot of kilometers of rivers, but it all goes nowhere. The Amazon River has the largest volume of fresh water of any river in the world. The surrounding rainforest is the largest on Earth. There are no bridges over the river. This is because the Amazon can rise over 30 feet during the rainy season, tripling the width of the river in some places. Any bridge would have to be incredibly long to have sure footing. There are also a few roads connecting to the Amazon, as the river itself is used for most of transportation. All this limits the development of any commercial infrastructure. The Amazon mainly serves local remote villages and carries far less national traffic than roads or rail. In 2024, the Amazon experienced its worst drought in 122 years. Water levels fell 30 feet below average, making the inland port of Manaus inaccessible. So this container ship, the MSC Mania, had to offload at this temporary floating port 100 miles away. Droughts, flooding, and shifting sandbars create hazards that make Brazil's rivers best suited for small barges. The Parana River in the south transports some soybeans and lithium, but overall has a minor share of freight. Most of Brazil's waterways are natural and undeveloped, and the reality is that there is very little freight carried over most of Brazil's rivers. Vietnam is a small country, a lot smaller than the USA, China, Russia, or Brazil, so for it to have the 3rd most extensive commercial river system is amazing. Its 17,000 kilometers of commercially usable waterways consist of 2 dense delta networks, the Red River Delta Network in the north and the Mekong River Delta in the south. The Mekong River Delta has many canals and sandbanks. Seasonal water swings are accompanied by strong currents and tides that complicate operations. Therefore, Vietnam's rivers are localized and less industrialized. They're best suited for small barges and small boats. The northern Red River Delta has scenic tourist attractions like the Ha Long Bay's limestone islets. The southern Mekong Delta is the dominant commercial zone. It's the most reliable and densely used, carrying 80% of the regional goods. Vietnam stands out for its unusually high reliance on waterways, carrying 18% of the total freight, second only to roads. In contrast, the United States rivers carry only 4% of the freight. America has 19,300 kilometers of commercial waterways, placing it at number 1 in the world. The United States annual freight transport is currently at 407 million metric tons, ranking as number 2 behind China. The USA is bordered with a 3,000-mile intracoastal waterway system providing protected ocean traffic, and the country is surrounded on 3 sides by oceans. Additionally, there are 5 northern Great Lakes, which allow the transport of massive loads of heavy bulk materials. America's waterways are heavily engineered to serve high freight volumes. This includes 218 locks and dams for consistent 9 to 14 foot depths at 176 different locations. They get regular dredging and are integrated with rail and trucking ports. Most major routes operate near year-round, with occasional low water or ice issues mitigated by maintenance. America's rivers are evenly distributed across 2/3 of the nation, providing blanket access. And when you add all the minor rivers and tributaries, you get a much better picture of just how thoroughly the land is covered with water. You really don't have to travel far to get water in America. The United States has 208 commercial ports handling at least 250,000 tons per year. The Port of Los Angeles, seen here, the Port of Houston, and the Port of New York and New Jersey. The United States has the most plug-and-play waterway system of any country in the world. America's rivers have worked from the start to serve the nation since its founding. This was especially important when there were no roads or railways. This river system played a big part in making the country a global power. Stratfor Intelligence covered this in a special report in 2011. They saw the unique layout of America's lands and rivers as precursors for an inevitable empire. Here is a summary of the statistics from the top 5 nations of the world with the longest river systems. The navigable links are listed in the second column. This can be interpreted as the theoretically maximum amount of kilometers under perfect conditions. China is number 1, with the United States at number 5. The third column lists the kilometers of waterways that are normally available for commercial use. These lengths are much smaller and show just how many kilometers are actually used on a regular basis. This is the number to look at. And you can see the United States is number 1 with their efficient, highly engineered waterways. The fourth column shows the amount of freight transported annually over their systems. China ranks number 1 here with a whopping 4.2 trillion metric tons of freight every year. China transports 10 times more products over their rivers than second place USA. To summarize, the USA's waterways are a mature, high-volume national asset for reliable year-round bulk transport. All the other nations have waterways that are regional, mostly undeveloped, unreliable, and weather-dependent, with flooding, droughts, and freezing regularly interfering with the operations. No one else has what America has, and no one else can better fit the biblical definition of the land of many waters. Let's look closer at the details of Isaiah's prophecy about the land that the rivers divide. He gives 10 unique criteria that unequivocally point to America. It's the only nation on earth that can possibly fit this description. Isaiah starts out by giving a very unique description of the land by saying, "Woe to the land shadowed or whirring and buzzing with wings." The word talatzel is incorrectly translated as shadowed. It actually means whirring or buzzing in Hebrew, and when you say it, it's supposed to make a whirring sound. This comes from the root word talatzel, meaning to tingle the ears by vibration. Today, whirring and buzzing makes perfect sense. It's talking about the wings of airplanes, helicopters, and drones. Here's a chart showing the top 3 countries in the world in terms of military aircraft, drones, and commercial aircraft. And the United States dramatically leads the world in every category, often with as many whirring wings as Russia and China added together. Look at how the United States dominates the skies. With 13,000 military aircraft, just about double what Russia and China have combined. It's the same with commercial aircraft and drones. There's no doubt about it. There's only one nation in the world that can be called the land of whirring and buzzing wings. This modern-day fulfillment of Isaiah's prophecy proves that we're living in the end times. The airplane was invented in the United States, the nation with the whirring wings. Orville Wright had the honor of controlling man's first machine-powered flight at 10:35 a.m. on December 17, 1903, near Kitty Hawk, North Carolina. He flew 120 feet in 12 seconds, facing a 27-mile-per-hour headwind, reaching a maximum height of 10 feet. Orville immediately sent this telegram to his father, Bishop M. Wright. He says, "Success! 4 flights Thursday morning, all against 21-mile wind. Started from level with engine power alone. Average speed through air, 31 miles. Longest, 57 seconds. Inform press. Home for Christmas." This video was shot 5 years later in 1908 with brother Wilbur Wright giving a demonstration in Le Mans, France. Just look at this flight radar snapshot of commercial aircraft from 3 p.m. in the United States Central Standard Time. There are as many planes over the United States as the rest of the world combined. Ironically, this image just might give some justice to the word that was translated as shadowed. On this tiny scale, the land does look totally shadowed with wings. Isaiah next says, "which is beyond the rivers of Ethiopia." This land is far away from Israel, farther than the rivers of Ethiopia. The Blue Nile and the White Nile come together at Khartoum, Sudan, to form the Nile. These are the rivers that Isaiah was talking about. The Blue Nile originates near Naktana in Ethiopia and contributes more than twice the volume of water than the White Nile. The distance from Israel to the rivers of Ethiopia is approximately 2,400 kilometers. The distance from Israel to the United States is almost 4 times further, 9,000 kilometers or 5,677 miles to New York. Isaiah needed a commonly known distant location, the headwaters of the Nile, to be able to show ancient Israel just what kind of scale was required to be able to measure the vast distance to the United States. And what better way to keep his land that the rivers divide theme than to use the longest river in the world as an illustration. This new land is much further away than the longest river in the world is. Here's Isaiah's next clue about this land, which sends ambassadors by sea, saying, "Go, swift messengers." Isaiah is describing a nation that houses the international headquarters for a group of global ambassadors. Everyone is welcome and invited to quickly join. And just like Isaiah predicted, the United States started hosting the United Nations headquarters in New York on October the 23rd, 1946, with 51 founding nations present. Today, there are 193 countries who are members, and they represent almost all the sovereign states. There's only 7 nations not recognized by the UN due to disputes. Isaiah's description implies that this host nation is isolated from the rest of the world by oceans. In order to send ambassadors to the rest of the world, it has to send them over the sea. This perfectly describes America, and we can already see just from Isaiah's first 2 conditions that the only nation on earth that he could possibly talking about is the United States of America. Next he says, "even in hollow vessels on the waters." The word reed is misleading. Since no commercial ships are made of reeds today, the word translated as reed is gome, meaning rush, reed, or papyrus. What all 3 of these have in common is their hollow stems, and the Hebrew gome is derived from gamma, which means to swallow liquids or drink. The idea presented here is to drink from a hollow straw. So the important point here is that the ships are hollow, not that they're made of grass-like aquatic sedges. Even hollow steel ships will float. This just shows that Isaiah's prophecy is not some ancient, outdated event that happened in the distant past with cheap boats made out of reeds. It was just his way of describing hollow ships, hollow like a reed. Now Isaiah continues to give a detailed description of America. To a nation, tall and smooth of skin, which actually should mean drawn, lifted out, and polished. This is another verse where modern translations totally miss Isaiah's description. The New King James says a nation tall and smooth of skin, with the of skin in italics, meaning that the words have been added by the translator and are not in the original Hebrew. The NIV says the same thing. The original King James says a nation scattered and peeled, which is even more confusing. Are these a bunch of tall people that are peeling from being sunburned? A closer look at these two words in the original Hebrew will help us solve this confusing phrase. Let's start out by looking at the second word, which has been mistranslated as smooth skin or peeled. It's the Hebrew word morot, and it only occurs 5 times in the Bible. As you can see here, the Hebrew morot can have 3 different definitions, and they all describe a smooth surface. However, when you look at each of the 5 times this word is used, only polished makes any sense at all. The first time, in 1 Kings 7:45, morot is translated as polished, as in polished brass, talking about the vessels that Hiram made for King Solomon for the house of YEHOVAH, of brass, polished. Isaiah uses the same word, morot, twice here in verses 2 and 7, and Ezekiel uses it twice in chapter 21, 9 through 11. Here's how Ezekiel uses this same word. Thus says YEHOVAH, a sword. A sword is sharpened and also polished. Sharpened to make a dreadful slaughter. Polished, morot, to flash like lightning. And he has given it to be polished, that it may be handled. The sword is sharpened and it is polished, morot, to be given into the hand of the slayer. So for 3 out of 5 times that morot is used, it definitely means polished. Why would it be any different with the 2 times in Isaiah's prophecy? It really does a terrible disservice to change polished to smooth or peeled. That brings us to the first word in Isaiah's phrase, which is also seriously mistranslated. The New King James translates it as tall, while the King James uses scattered. It's the Hebrew word mashak, which means to draw and lift out, like drawing a bow or a sword. So the Hebrew phrase, mashak morot, literally means drawn and lifted out and polished. This is most likely a Hebrew idiom referring to a sword. We know that Ezekiel emphasized the word polished twice when referring to YEHOVAH's sword, and here Isaiah uses it twice more in conjunction with drawn and lifted out. This perfectly describes a sword in someone's hand who is ready, willing, and able to fight. And that perfectly describes America. Ezekiel's verses show that it's not enough for a sword to be sharpened. A sword should also be polished to flash like lightning, and that is if you're serious about using it. And that is how the Hebrew word morot is used 4 out of the 5 times. It has to be talking about a sword. America is also drawn out over a large area, as well as lifted up and polished. America is a big nation, standing up on a pedestal and shining brightly. It's a shining city on a hill, the very term that John Winthrop called the Massachusetts Bay Colony in 1630. Just look at John Winthrop's sermon to the new settlers aboard the ship named Arbella as they arrived at Massachusetts Bay. The words of this speech give us a unique look at the settlers' excited expectations to see God's blessings with them in America. This was delivered as they arrived in Massachusetts Bay, June 14th, 1630, and they're still aboard the Arbella. The Lord will be our God, and delight to dwell among us, as his own people, and will command a blessing upon us in all our ways, so that we shall see much more of his wisdom, power, goodness, and truth than formerly we have been acquainted with. We shall find that the God of Israel is among us, when 10 of us shall be able to resist 1,000 of our enemies, when he shall make us a praise and glory, that men shall say of succeeding plantations, the Lord make it like that of New England. For we must consider that we shall be as a city upon a hill. The eyes of all people are upon us. Now let's get back to the people who were drawn, lifted out, and polished, which is referencing a people with a drawn sword. And see that in this light, Isaiah's next 2 statements make perfect sense. A people terrible from their beginning onward, a nation powerful and treading down, whose land the rivers divide. This is a nation of people who always have their swords drawn, lifted out of his sheath, and brightly polished. They're ready to fight any time. This nation started out from its very beginning with fierce and powerful people. Well, how did the United States start? They defeated the #1 global power in the world, the British Empire. Terrible from the beginning. That's America, and we have been fighting ever since. The USA has maintained near constant military activity globally for most of its history. America has been at war for about 92% of the time. Just look at the United States overseas military footprint. The United States has 742 military bases in 82 countries and territories, 230,000 military personnel in 173 countries and territories, bilateral military agreements with 182 countries and territories. There are only 193 countries total in the United Nations. That means there's only 11 nations that the USA doesn't have any military agreement with. The United States spends $1 trillion annually on its military, more than the next 10 nations combined. Former National Security Advisor Zbigniew Brzezinski made a profound statement in his article Toward a Global Realignment from April 17, 2016. He said, "The fact is that there has never been a truly dominant global power until the emergence of America on the world scene." Zbigniew Brzezinski was a National Security Advisor to President Jimmy Carter from 1977 to 81. He continued saying, "Imperial Britain came close to becoming one, but World War I and later World War II bankrupted it. Here's a map of the British Empire, and you can see that they didn't have anything close to the global dominance that America enjoys. Even the ancient Roman Empire at its height pales in significance to America's military might. It actually looks like a small empire in comparison. America has definitely been a people terrible from their beginning, and it still is a very powerful nation that treads down." Next, Isaiah says, "All you inhabitants of the world and dwellers of the earth, when America lifts up a banner on the mountains, you see. And when America blows a trumpet, you hear." So America has a very loud voice. The world listens to everything that they say. In traditional media and entertainment, the USA has 85% of the revenue share globally. U.S.-based conglomerates overwhelmingly lead in traditional segments like linear TV networks, major film studios, broadcast, and content production globally. The U.S. studios alone have 51% of the world's cinema box office draw. We're talking about the U.S.-based conglomerates Comcast and NBC Universal, $123 billion total revenue, and the Walt Disney Company with $94 billion total. Foreign-owned conglomerates are like a tenth as big. Sony Group in Japan is about $10 billion annually. Bertelsmann in Germany has about $20 billion. In news services and wires, the U.S. Western influence makes up 68% of the international coverage. The Associated Press says they reach 4 billion people daily, with 220 locations in 90 countries and customers in 126 countries. Bloomberg News gives most of the world's financial data and reaching almost 1 billion daily. Agency France Presse reaches about 1 billion daily, and Xinhua in China reaches about 750 million daily. TASS in Russia has 1/3 billion daily. So nobody even comes close. In social media, the United States has 80% of the ad revenue. Meta, Facebook, WhatsApp, Instagram, and Threads make up 63%, and the alphabet company's YouTube makes 17%. Compare that with TikTok, owned by ByteDance in China, 13%, and WeChat, owned by Tencent, with 5%. Let's look at the global daily social media activity. 4 billion people use American social media platforms every single day. That's 47% of the world, and of that, the Meta family takes the largest share, 43%, with Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, and Messenger. 1/3 of the world's population has no social media activity at all, which is 2.65 billion. And when you compare that with the 6 billion people who do have internet access, so 90% of the world that has internet access is actively using social media, and it's almost all Facebook. Facebook has 3 billion monthly active users, and Facebook has 2 billion daily active users. The Facebook plus Instagram plus WhatsApp plus Messenger makes 4 billion people using that group monthly, the Meta family. The Facebook Meta family has 1/2 of the world using it and 2/3 of the internet-connected population. YouTube has 2.7 billion monthly active users. However, only 122 million use it every day. YouTube reaches 1/2 of all the internet users and 1/3 of the world's population monthly. In streaming, the U.S. influence platforms have 92% of the market share. We're talking Netflix is 25%, YouTube 20%, Disney and Hulu 15%, Amazon Prime 15%, Max, Warner Brothers Discovery 12%, and then you got Paramount with 5% and Peacock with 3%. China has Tencent Video, iQIYI, Youku, which makes up about 5%. And that's enormous domestically in China because they have about 1 billion social streaming users, but it's very limited reach outside of China due to the Great Firewall and the language barrier also. So the overall global influence, the USA influences 60% of global audiences, culture, and conversations. The United States remains the world's leading exporter of ideas, entertainment, news, and digital culture. This is despite China's Great Firewall, which blocks all the U.S. Western platforms, isolating their 1 billion people and forcing them to use state-backed platforms, WeChat, Tencent Video, iQIYI, and Xinhua. Russia is not yet as hermetically sealed as China, but is rapidly building a digital iron curtain. Facebook and Instagram and X have been blocked since 2022. YouTube is heavily throttled since 2025, and Telegram now has restrictions. Iran and North Korea also totally censor all U.S. media. But India and all the Muslim nations, they're free to use the U.S. Western platforms. There are 2 other avenues of media influence in which the United States projects a huge voice globally. The United States is one of the 5 permanent members of the United Nations Security Council, and it gets to have a veto on anything that it doesn't like. That's a huge voice. And also the presidential announcements. Political decisions and presidential addresses get instant global attention on a daily, if not hourly basis. Every single time a U.S. president talks, the world listens. Looking back at Isaiah's description, it's plain to see that he was definitely talking about the United States of America. His prophecy can only be fulfilled by one distinct nation in the whole world, America. It really is crystal clear. All you inhabitants of the world and dwellers on the earth, When America lifts up a banner on the mountains, you see, and when America blows a trumpet, you hear. Recall that Isaiah started out his prophecy with this phrase, woe to the land. Isaiah starts out with woe. He's declaring a judgment on the land that the rivers divide. And now we can be 100% certain that this land is definitely the United States of America. Incidentally, Jeremiah prophesied the exact same thing. O you who dwell by many waters, abundant in treasures, your end has come. And John prophesied it too. Come, I will show you the judgment of the great harlot, who sits on many waters. This makes 3 times that a judgment has been declared over this land of many waters that the rivers divide. And each of these prophets gave a lot more details on just what these judgments are. But since we've been focusing on Isaiah, let's consider just what he says. In verse 4, YEHOVAH tells Isaiah that he will burn in anger over the land where the rivers divide. For so YEHOVAH said to me, I will take my rest, I will look for my dwelling place, like clear heat and sunshine, like a cloud of dew in the heat of harvest. Something makes God steaming mad, like the waves of heat rising up on a hot day, like a cloud of dew over a wheat field on a hot day. Then he takes action against the land that the rivers divide. In verse 5, Isaiah says that YEHOVAH will both cut off the sprigs with pruning hooks and take away and cut down the branches of the land the rivers divide. Are these branches military bases? These are what project America's power across the globe. And what causes God to cut them down? Here's the most probable scenario. President Trump initiated the Abraham Accords on September 15th of 2020, which normalized relations between Israel and a couple of Arab nations, specifically the United Arab Emirates, UAE, and Bahrain. Within months, Morocco and Sudan joined, and in 2025, Kazakhstan signed on to the agreement. However, the major players like Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Syria, and Lebanon are all hesitant. They probably won't sign on until they're promised to have a Palestinian state on Israeli land, on God's land. That's what he calls it. They really don't care at all about any Palestinian state, and they could care even less about the so-called Palestinians. Ezekiel tells us the real motive. Thus says the Lord, YEHOVAH, surely I have spoken in my burning jealousy against the rest of the nations. By the way, this means United Nations. And against all Edom, Saudi Arabia, who gave my land to themselves as a possession with a wholehearted joy and spiteful minds in order to plunder its open country. YEHOVAH says that he has a burning jealousy towards his land. This is what will make him burning mad against the United States. Most likely, President Trump will force Israel to divide up God's land and give it to the so-called Palestinian Arabs, who really are Egyptians, Lebanese, Syrians, etc. This will provoke God to judge the perpetrators along with the main instigator, the United States of America. President Trump has already shown his desire to divide up a small port of Jerusalem in order to create a capital for a Palestinian state. Just look at his January 28, 2020 post on Twitter, where he included a map of a Palestinian state. President Trump states, this is what a future state of Palestine can look like, with a capital in parts of East Jerusalem. He is willing to divide Jerusalem. But what does the Bible say happens to someone who tries to divide Jerusalem? I will make Jerusalem a very heavy stone for all peoples. All who would heave it away would surely be cut in pieces. Zechariah 12:3. Let's look at the Hebrew word for cut in pieces. It's pronounced sarat. However, it's repeated twice. In Hebrew, it actually says sarat sarat, or cut cut. This word means to incise, cut, or be lacerated, and it's repeated twice. This is serious. God's not messing around. You don't just get a small nick, you get lacerated in pieces. Notice that God used the same language earlier when Isaiah mentioned the judgment upon the land that the rivers divide. He said he would cut off the sprigs and cut down the branches. YEHOVAH used the word cut twice. That's the same judgment for dividing up Jerusalem. This proves what the United States is going to do. President Trump will accomplish during his second term what he wanted to do in his first. This time he will succeed in doing it, and President Trump will force Israel to divide Jerusalem. And don't think that America will get away with it scot-free. Not only will America lose her global power, but she'll be divided into pieces herself, just like she did to Israel. That's what we can expect to see. President Trump will convince the Arabs to agree to a major concession before he forces Israel to divide up God's land. They will have to allow Israel to build a temple on Mount Zion. That's his art of the deal style of negotiating. It's very plain to see what he's going to do. I can see it coming from a mile away. Give both sides something that they want. The Palestinians get a country, Israel gets their temple. What could possibly go wrong? Two verses later, Isaiah amazingly confirms this exact scenario. In that time, a present will be brought to YEHOVAH of hosts from a people drawn, lifted out, and polished, from a people terrible from their beginning onward, a nation powerful in treading down, whose land the rivers divide, to the place of the name of YEHOVAH of hosts, to Mount Zion. The daughter of Babylon, that's America, is going to bring a gift to Israel to the Temple Mount, that's Mount Zion. This gift obviously will be to help Israel build a third temple. This is what President Trump promised them. He's just fulfilling America's part of the bargain. And Isaiah saw it 2,500 years ago. Is there any other nation more likely to help Israel build a temple than the United States? No. Just look at how the Trump administration has worked side by side with Israel in fighting Iran. No other country in the world is going to do that. And practically all the other nations fervently hate Israel. No other president would be this friendly towards Israel either. If you call dividing up Jerusalem friendly, this means that this all has to happen before President Trump's second term ends on January 20th of 2029. We're pretty much locked into this time period. 29 chapters later, Isaiah addresses God's judgment of the daughter of Babylon. He doesn't just say, "O daughter of Babylon." He sarcastically says, "O virgin, daughter of Babylon." Come down and sit in the dust, O virgin, daughter of Babylon. Sit on the ground without a throne. I will take vengeance, for you shall no longer be called the Lady of Kingdoms. I was angry with my people, and given them into your hand. You showed them no mercy, nor remember the latter end. Notice that Isaiah is not talking about ancient Babylon here. He's talking to a futuristic daughter of Babylon. The daughter of Babylon is going to lose her global position all because of how she treated Israel. She didn't consider the latter end when God said he would restore Israel, and she didn't consider God's promise to cut in pieces. Zechariah gives us some more details about the daughter of Babylon. Remember, it was Zechariah that told us how YEHOVAH would cut in pieces the ones coming against Jerusalem. Up Zion, escape, you who dwell with the daughter of Babylon. The daughter of Babylon has a lot of Jewish people living in it. That's why Zechariah is telling them to escape before YEHOVAH judges her. There are 16 million Jews globally, with 7.2 million in Israel and 6.3 million in the United States. That makes Israel and the USA holding 85% of all the Jews. This is more proof that the United States has to be the daughter of Babylon. About 40% of the total Jewish population in the world lives in the United States. No other nation even comes close. Zion does dwell with the United States, just like Zechariah said. An unnamed psalmist who was taken captive to Babylon in 586 BCE prophesied against the daughter of Babylon, not ancient Babylon where he was currently a prisoner, but against the daughter of Babylon. And this is what he wrote: O daughter of Babylon, who are to be destroyed, happy the one who repays you as you have served us. So America will betray Israel, and that will cause YEHOVAH to judge her. This is where we are today, and it could easily happen before the year 2029. America has been a great friend of Israel, as well as a golden cup in God's hand. But the moment we divide God's land, it's over. And in the book of Revelation, God chooses to remember her not as America, but as Mystery Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and of the abominations of the earth. America has strayed from being a beacon of righteousness to the world. President Reagan attempted to bring her back on course, and in some ways he temporarily succeeded. In his farewell speech on January 11th of 1989, Reagan alluded to John Winthrop's famous quote about a city on a hill, saying that this was the vision that he had always had and he wanted to accomplish for his whole career.
This place called America, this shining city on a hill, this government of, by, and for the people. Thank you, and God bless you.
The past few days, when I've been at that window upstairs, I've thought a bit of the shining city upon a hill. The phrase comes from John Winthrop, who wrote it to describe the America he imagined. What he imagined was important because he was an early pilgrim, an early freedom man. He journeyed here on what today we'd call a little wooden boat. And like the other pilgrims, he was looking for a home that would be free. I've spoken of the shining city all my political life, but I don't know if I ever quite communicated what I saw when I said it. But in my mind, it was a tall, proud city built on rocks stronger than oceans, windswept, God-blessed, and teeming with people of all kinds living in harmony and peace. A city with free ports that hummed with commerce and creativity. And if there had to be city walls, the walls had doors, and the doors were open to anyone with the will and the heart to get here. That's how I saw it and see it still.
There's more to John Winthrop's speech, parts that President Reagan didn't quote, things that Winthrop said after mentioning the city on a hill, things that we should consider today. So let me leave you with John Winthrop's somber warning that he gave aboard the Arbella on June 14th of 1630, before the Massachusetts settlers had even departed the ship. For we must consider that we shall be as a city upon a hill. The eyes of all people are upon us, so that if we shall deal falsely with our God in this work we have undertaken, and so cause him to withdraw his present help from us, we shall be made a story and a byword through the world. We shall open the mouths of enemies to speak evil of the ways of God and all professors for God's sake. We shall shame the faces of many of God's worthy servants and cause their prayers to be turned into curses upon us till we be consumed out of the good land whither we are a-going.